and Geltrude and Company founder, best-selling author Dan Geltrude. Dan, and begin with you on what the governor was saying. He's optimistic on the trade front, optimistic on the economy front, but we've had this crazy month, right? Today, notwithstanding the inverted, flattening yield curve, what do you want to call it? Fears of a global slowdown. China's still uncertain. What do you think?
Well, I think what we're seeing is the market reacting like Pavlov's dogs here, right? Every time something comes up about China, the market is chasing it, whether it's up or down. But I'll tell you something interesting related to this trade war. We've had a tit for tat going back and forth. We raise, they raise. Right. What changed all of a sudden now that China is calling for calm? And I'll tell you what I think it is. It's when the president turned around and said he was considering ordering American companies out of China. To me, that was the breaking point that woke up China to say, hey, wait a minute. If these supply chains...
Well, that was a breaking point for Wall Street, too. They got frantic.
Yes, they did. Because now, whether the president can do that or not, who knows, Neil? Yeah. But the threat of it or the suggestion of it, I think, woke up the Chinese. And now they're saying, hey, this is really serious if we're going to have a migration of U.S. companies out of China.
Dan, real quick thought on that. And commodities racing, stocks racing, hopes for something happening. What do you need to see as this goes on?
Well, they've actually done a pretty good job in these trade negotiations, keeping things pretty hush. Nobody actually really knows what's going on. For example, we don't exactly know why the Chinese pulled out in May. So I think that unknown, that part of it is really bothering the markets. Just not understanding where does this really stand. The only information we're getting is from tweets, and how reliable is that?
I don't know. Yeah, well, we don't know. All right, but
I have a point I'd like to ask Chris. Chris, it's Dan Geltrude. I think a critical point that you mentioned was the insurance factor, right? Because if you don't have insurance, you really have a big problem, especially if you're a small business. Is it too late for people out there to go out and get insurance in time for this storm that's going to hit Florida?
Well, you're absolutely right. Insurance is absolutely important. The insurance industry itself paid out over $90 billion to help people that dealt with losses. Unfortunately, right now, you're probably going to run into some red tape in trying to apply to get those policies in act. But I think it's really important that hopefully this storm will bypass and it's not as bad as they're predicting. But I want people to put it on their to-do list. The last thing you want to do is put things off and wait until the last minute. So again, make it a priority to make those phone calls to your insurance professionals to find out where you are. If you're struggling to figure out where to find some, I have some at my website, chrishogan360.com, that can help you with the insurances and things that we need.
Scott, it's Dan Geltrude. I have a question for you related to the infamous inverted yield curve. So my question is simple. Does it even matter anymore?
You know, there was an old movie with Bill Murray, Meatballs, and the byline was, it just doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter, because a couple of things that everybody needs to know. A lot of times when we had these inverted yield curves before, most of them were in interest rate rising environments, right? Where the short end overtook the back end. When we're cutting rates, that's very rare to have this happen, number one. And number two, it's not a lot of our own doing. The short end, we got a little out of our head of ourselves and over our skis and hiked rates a little bit too much at the end of last year. But our long end is suffering because of what else is happening around the world. That's not just us. So arguably in a vacuum, you could argue we don't need to cut rates here in the U.S. But because it's a global village now, I hate that term, but now we're suffering from the ills of other central banks around the world, especially Europe, which are driving our long end rates down and now lower than our short term. So I don't think it matters. It does if you're running a bank, obviously, but I don't think it's the recession flag that everybody's talking about.
True. Dan, that's the worry, that I think this is more than just coincidental.
I think once we get to the point, if it happens, where the Hong Kong police can't keep things under control, the Chinese military is going to go in. Now, this weekend on Saturday, there's supposed to be a huge rally going on. We have the potential for violence. I think if that starts to happen, there's potential there. Then on Monday, there's also going to be a worker strike. So there's going to be a lot of unrest going on in the area. I think China's preparing for it. And if they have to go in, there'll be no second thought, Neil. They're going to go in, they're going to do what they have to do, and it's going to be done.
I've had guests on this show as well saying at their core they're military.
Yeah,
and these who argue, well, it's very different than it was 30 years ago with Tiananmen. It's not.
No, but I think this, if they did what he was just saying, it would be a huge mistake on their part. I think it would create a much stronger backing behind Hong Kong, and it would also, the countries in Europe, along with the United States, they would come and support Hong Kong and be against China. I think it would be a fatal, fatal mistake for China long term.
What do you think, Karen?
Yeah, I think the military moving in was pretty predictable, given the fact that Carrie Lam kept telling, what part
the
of
administrator,
yeah,
what do they call her?
Yeah, the administrator
like
kept telling the protesters, what part of no don't you understand? I'm not backing off, right?
Yeah.
And given that we're leading up to the 70-year anniversary, China,
Yeah.
and really there has not been significant pushback from the United States or the international community in this regard, which is sort of
well, what's weird,
disappointing
we
to
didn't
see.
want to confuse it with the trade stuff, so
Right.
I guess I see part of that, but we were always convinced, like weeks ago into this now, every weekend, to your point, the protest, that
Right.
by now it would have dissipated. It's not. It's heating up.
It is, but but I still think the U.S., the president, the White House could have said, or should say, look, China does not keep its deal. Their deal was to give the people of Hong Kong autonomy for autonomy, semi-autonomous, whatever you want to call it, 50 years, and that would go to 2043. But so there has been no pushback.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
If they lie to their own people, what makes you think they're not lying to us?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Neil, I think China views this as, what is the rest of the world really going to do to us? I mean, there's not going to be a counter-military action, so that's off the table. I mean, we're not going to send troops there to fight against the Chinese, nor is anyone else. That's point one. Point two, are we going to actually now put sanctions against China? Are they going to join in? Are we going to up tariffs? I don't really see
So you don't think
anything.
the Europeans or anyone else have the backbone to do something like that? China would get away with it, much as it did with Tiananmen Square 30 years ago.
And I think they're banking on that. So when the time comes that they have to take action, they're going to take action without regard for what the consequences may be, because there aren't going to be any.